I spent last Sabbath with a really nice group at Crestwell Church, Crestwell, Oregon. And I spoke there probably 4 or 5 times now, 6 times, maybe more than that. Quite a few times I've been out there and spoke to the group. This last time we actually had, they told me it was the largest group they'd ever had in that church. Very, very nice group of people, all looking for the second coming of Christ. It was a very nice Sabbath. Met a lot of interesting people. I met a fellow, just tell you briefly, I met a gentleman that actually helped to build 2 of the HART programs. If anybody that's ever heard of HART, he helped to build the one in Alaska, and he helped to build the one in Greenland. And he showed me some photographs that he'd taken of the sky and different things were happening. And, so I've read a little bit about HART, but it was interesting to meet a guy that's been on the ground and helped to put it all together. And he told me when they first turned the one on in Alaska, in just a few hours they melted, I think it was 3 feet of ice or something. And on the northern part of Alaska for quite a ways, 3 days, the water came up 15 inches.
Wow.
And so it was a little bit different than what they were expecting. But he was telling me that it all works really well. Now, I will tell you this, that he is not positive about it now. He told me a lot of very negative things. And, you know, what's going on and what the government is doing with that. But a very interesting individual, nonetheless. He'd been on many government projects, working on a bunch of government things he was sharing with me. And, you know, and all I could think about, boy, time is not going to go on much longer. With all the weapons that are out there, you know, all that is going on, we are at the end of time. And I don't know if people are watching about the cabinet that's being chosen. Yesterday was announced that Sessions would be the Attorney General. And they also announced the head of the CIA. And I don't know if people are watching the names of the ones that are coming up. But the gentleman that is to become the head of the CIA believes that we need to have every Muslim in the United States registered and have ongoing situation just like after 9/11. Now, where nobody here is Muslim, probably nobody remembers what happened right after 9/11 to the Muslim people. I was in California in 2000, I think we went there in 2004, and I bought and sold a car to a guy that had a dealership in Monterey. He was a Muslim gentleman. He'd been here for many years. He has, I think, 3 of his children were born here. And he told me once a month that he and his family had to report to an FBI agent in Monterey. And they had to give reference to wherever they traveled, if they left Monterey and so forth, and they had to give that information. Keep in mind, Adolf Hitler did that in Germany. And it was at one point all across Europe that Jews had to register. So for those that are thinking we have lots of time left and that things are going to be smooth and wonderful from here on out, I believe you're going to be very surprised. I could be wrong about everything. But from what I see, the Bible is very accurate. So I am pinning all my hopes on the Lord's second coming because things don't look good if he doesn't. I'm just going to kneel for just a moment, have a word of prayer. You folks remain seated, and I'm going to pray silently and ask you to pray in your hearts that the Lord is here with us. Okay, this subject that we're dealing with today is a direct result of somebody asking me to do a study on tongues. Now, I will tell you this is a 2-part study, I'm scheduled to speak here next Sabbath, so I'm not going to give the punchline this Sabbath, okay? So y'all need to be here next Sabbath if you're going to hear this one. Or you could get a misunderstanding, and there's a reason why I'm taking as long as I am to do this. The last study that I did was on alcohol, and I probably should have done that in a 2-part study because there's so many verses that I did not cover the last time that I spoke. I think I did alcohol here, didn't I? Okay. All right. So, interesting story. When I first moved to Maine, that would have been somewhere around 1979, I believe. Had an interesting story I read in the newspaper. A woman wanted to come home for the holidays, as I recall, and she got on an airplane and she flew to Portland. And she was, well, I think she was from Texas or Arizona or someplace, I can't remember where it was. But she had a good nap on the airplane. She landed, got off the airplane, and found out she was in Portland, Oregon, not Portland, Maine. And so now that's very difficult to do now, because now they have scanned things when you go on the airplane and so forth. But this is where she bought her ticket to go to Portland, and walking down through the airport, and you know how you see behind the desk sometimes you'll see the cities this airplane probably leave to. And a lot of times they won't have the state there, but let's say Cincinnati or let's say Orlando or Los Angeles. And we all know those cities. Where a lot of people don't know where Portland, Maine is. But she just saw Portland, and she sat down, she got on the airplane, and you know her ticket said Portland, and this is back when all the flights weren't full. She had the right seat, right type of airplane, and she landed in Portland, Oregon. And she missed her time with the family. They did get her back to Portland, Maine, a day or two later. But it's interesting that, you know, when we think we have down pat the language, that sometimes there's a little bit of confusion. Now, I know probably this never happens to anybody here, but sometimes my wife and I will be discussing something and think we're on the same page. Well, I told you that. Well, no, that's not what you said. You said X, Y, Z. Now, that probably only happens in my home. But you guys have that issue too?
Oh, yeah.
And everybody's speaking English, or are you guys speaking different language? So these struggles that we have, you know, words convey thought, you know. And we're going to have a study on tongues and what that means. Tongues. And this is a picture of a tongue right here. Very interesting. You know, everybody's tongue is a little bit different. Did you know that? Yeah. Just like their eyes a little bit different, fingerprints a little bit different. Everybody's tongue is just a little bit different. Different looking tongue here. And looks like it has a few more taste buds on it than the other ones. Now this man here, and he's listed in the Guinness Book of World Records as the longest tongue. There's a girl right now that is trying to dispute that. But his tongue is 4 inches when he closes his mouth. From as far out as he can get his tongue from the lips, it's just about 4 inches long.
Wow.
That's pretty long.
Yes.
So something very interesting. I don't know if anybody here remembers Rodney Haskell.
Yes.
I believe he could have given people a run for his money.
Yeah.
If anybody ever saw him do all his tongue tricks or whatever. Rodney died here some time back.
Oh my gosh.
Here's a tongue that somebody had surgery on, and this is quite a popular surgery, getting more and more popular, where people would get their tongue split.
Oh my
And
gosh.
most often, usually they can control the halves of the tongue simultaneously, do different things. And actually, there's pictures on the internet, people can, you know, pick things up with their tongue and move them independently. Very interesting. I would recommend this, but I'm just saying it's interesting, you know, what people do to their tongues. And this is a picture, a drawing of a tongue. You can see the different things. They usually, right here at the midline groove, is where they actually cut to separate this. And different muscle controls each side. The tongue can be used for licking. You know, tongue's used for a lot of things. In Numbers 22:4, it says, "And Moab said unto the elders of Midian, Now shall this company lick up all that are round about us, as the ox licketh up the grass in the field. And Balak the son of Zippor was king of the Moabites at that time." The tongue can be used for licking. 1 Kings 21:19. "Thus saith the Lord, in the place where dogs lick the blood of Naboth, shall dogs lick thy blood, even thine." And there's other references to the tongue being used for licking. For taste, "And that which is unsavory be eaten without salt, or is there any taste in the white of an egg?" That's a good question. Can you taste the white of an egg?
No.
No flavor. Okay? In Job 6:30, "Is there iniquity in my tongue? Cannot my taste discern perverse things?" So it's interesting, Job in the same chapter switches from the physical to the spiritual, right? Because can a tongue tell you if something is if it's a sin or not sin. Huh? Yeah. Okay. The taste we need most is Psalms 34:8. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man that trusteth in him. I have to say amen to that. That is the taste we all need to have in our mouth. Tongues can be used for singing. Psalms 126:2. Then was our mouth filled with laughter, and our tongue was singing. Then said they among the heathen, the Lord hath done great things for them. Singing. I like to sing. I like a joyful noise in the Lord. I appreciate several of the songs that were played during the interlude here, or whatever we call it. I enjoy really good hymns. I like good music. Tongues can speak. Psalms 33:2. Behold now, I have opened my mouth. My tongue is spoken in my mouth. Psalms 109:2. For the mouth of the wicked and the mouth of the deceitful are open against me. They have spoken against me with a lying tongue. Can your tongue lie? Or is it actually controlled by something else? Does the lie come from the heart? Okay? Interesting. And that every tongue should confess that Jesus Christ is Lord to the glory of God the Father. Philippians 2:11. Psalms 120:2. Deliver my soul, O Lord, from lying lips and a deceitful tongue. And that's a prayer I have to pray. It's interesting, sometimes, in our struggle, in our battle every day, we have a tendency to gravitate towards evil. Have you noticed that? That the human mind, if left alone outside of God, seems to always find the lower path. Maybe that's just me that struggles with some of those things. But every day it's a battle. It's a war that we're in. Who's going to conquer the heart today? For both part 1 and part 2 of this study, we're going to deal with the tongue as a communication thing, avenue of speech. Okay? Nimrod, the first king. Anybody heard of Nimrod? Nimrod. What did Nimrod do? Built the first city right after the flood, in the Tower of Babel. Genesis 10:8-10. And Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh, and the land of Shinar. Now, where else was Shinar? What else happened in Shinar that we know of? Remember, Daniel was taken to the land of Shinar, Babylon, right? Okay? Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. They built the Tower of Babel, and their idea was that it would reach unto God, right? They weren't going to trust the situation. I mean, the story of the flood was still there. They'd have had an interesting time talking to some of the people today that say the flood never happened, because it was very real in their minds and imagination. And I believe that the Tower of Babel was much bigger than pictured here, but this is an artist's conception of the Tower of Babel. Genesis 11:1-4, and the whole earth was of one language and one speech. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, go to, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, slime had they for mortar. And they said, go to, let us build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach into heaven. And let us make a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. Everybody was involved with building the tower. You just imagine, if I was a kid and I saw something going on, I'd want to either help or I'd want to make something look similar to that. I remember when my dad used to work on the airplane. We had it at our house all apart. First one we had out behind the house, the second one we had in the garage. And Dad would like to work on it. I'd like to help him, and if I wasn't helping him, I'd have a model airplane. I'd be doing the same thing he was doing. So if he was painting the airplane, or if he had the engine off, why, I would have that thing all apart in the model. Kids would do the same thing. It's interesting how when we're doing something, if we're doing something for good, pointing to God, or we're doing something for evil, us kids, we all want to be part of it, one way or the other, don't we? Genesis 11:6-9. And the Lord said, behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. And you just imagine, there's been different poems written about this, but man up on top, calling for more slime or more mortar, and somebody sends up straw. A lot of confusion. And just a really short time happens. And then people start arguing and fighting, because everybody's right? Why can't you talk right, Ted? You used to be able to understand and speak English, Now you're speaking, I don't know what you're doing. You must have bumped your head. Well, everybody else is doing the same thing. Confusion seems to come in. And who brought this? Who brought this upon the people? So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth. Now, what did he tell Noah when Noah came out of the ark? He told him to go forward and repopulate the earth, right? But Nimrod gathered the people together, built cities, 4 cities in the plains of Shinar, and then they built a tower. So you've got somebody now that has established a kingdom, and who was the only king at that time? God was the only king. But man has now declared himself king. He builds a tower, and God said, no, we're not going to do it that way. We're going to do it my way. Never go against God's way, because it's going to hurt in the long run. Babel, confusion. This is a Hebrew word. It's 894 in the Strong Concordance. So it's Babylon. Babylon. The word Babylon, with the idea conveyed by it, is from Babel. And the word Babel comes to us from the tower described in Genesis 11. And from the confusion of tongues created there on account of the tower, the word now signifies confusion. But this was not the original meaning of the word Babel. Okay? So the word Babel, or Babylon, in Hebrew, means confusion. This was the name of the city and the tower when the people began to build it. At that time, the meaning of the word Babel, its original meaning, was gate of God. Remember, they were going to build this tower that was going to lead to God. Okay, the gateway of God. Accordingly, they said, let us build us a city and a tower whose top may reach into heaven. It's by a man named Alonzo Trippier Jones, 1900. Nebuchadnezzar built up Babylon, Daniel 4:30. The king spake and said, is not this great Babylon that I have built for the house of the kingdom by the might of my power and for the honor of my majesty? Now, when Nebuchadnezzar is saying, is this not the great Babylon that I have built? You think he's saying, is this not the great confusion that I have built? That's not what he was saying. Okay? He was saying something completely different. It's interesting, in the Hebrew, this word means confusion. In the Chaldean language, it means gate of God, or gateway to God. So you take those 2 different languages as 2 different complete meanings. Okay? Now it's interesting, we see this over and over and over again with the different languages. And we are here today as a direct result of what God did at the Tower of Babel. If it had not been for God coming down and confusing the languages, the tongues, we would not be having this study. You know that? Even with all the other sin and all the other studies we could have, we wouldn't be discussing this subject of tongues. Why? We'd all be speaking the same language, right? Okay. Genesis 10:20. These are the sons of Ham after their families, after their tongues, and their countries, and their nations. Genesis 10:31. These are the sons of Shem after their families, after their tongues, and their lands, after their nations. It's interesting, when God does things, he is so merciful when he does it. When the languages came in, all the different languages, God kept them amongst certain peoples. So like the family of Shem would speak one language, and maybe there'd be several languages spoken underneath Shem, but he did not divide families. So in other words, with my wife and my 2 children, he would not have separated the 4 of us with all different languages. Now the devil would do stuff like that, but God doesn't do things like that. So he grouped the people together in their groups and their people that they were all part of. And they went and settled in different parts of the world at that time. 2 Kings 18:17-26, or 17 and 26. It reads this. And the king of Assyria sent Tartan and Rabsaris and Rabshakeh from Lachish to King Hezekiah with a great host against Jerusalem. Then said Eliakim unto Rebushak, Speak, I pray thee, to thy servants in the Syrian language, for we understand it, and talk not with us in the Jews' language, and the ears of the people are on the wall. So here we have a situation that a group from Babylon, or up the northern power, comes down, and their idea is to do what to Jerusalem? To destroy it. And so here you have one of the leadership from Israel, from Jerusalem, and they're conversing back and forth between this heathen individual who is bringing a whole army down there, and they're saying, don't talk in the language that everybody here understands. But Rebushak said unto them, Hath my master sent me to thy master and to thee to speak these words? Hath he not sent me to the men which sit on the wall, that they may eat their own dung, drink their own piss with you? Then Rebushak stood and cried with loud voice in the Jews' language and spake, saying, Hear the word of the great king, the king of Assyria. He came to put fear in the hearts of all mankind. And so he spoke in the Hebrew tongue. The communication. He wanted to make sure that there was no slip up with the message that the king of Assyria had sent down to the people that lived in Jerusalem. And this was fulfilling the prophecy that Moses actually wrote about in Deuteronomy chapter 28. The Lord shall bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as an eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand, a nation of fierce countenance, which shall not regard the person of the old, nor show favor to the young. You know, it's interesting that this time Hezekiah turned his heart to the Lord, and all the people turned to the Lord. And again, God is so merciful. And what did God do? He destroyed the whole Assyrian army. Okay, and how many died? Anybody remember? I think it was 180,000, if I remember correctly, 185,000. Then a destroying angel went and destroyed that whole army. So he recognized there was a God in heaven. But the time came when they slipped right back in the same demonic worship, the same demonic influences that they had before. And God sent Nebuchadnezzar. And this time things were different. Nebuchadnezzar had his way. And the Jews, he ended up going and destroying Jerusalem. How many times? Anybody remember? 3 times. There was 3 attacks on Jerusalem. He went down and he destroyed it, or didn't completely destroy it, but he killed a lot of people, brought a lot of people up there to Babylon, left people to take care of it. Set up a king there, and pretty soon they wandered away, tried to break away from Nebuchadnezzar. Sent soldiers again, beat them up again, killed a bunch more people. The 3rd time, he just leveled the city because he wasn't going to put up with it. Broke all the walls down, killed everybody off, and people thought it would never be built up again. Ezra speaks of a letter that would attempt to stop the building up of Jerusalem. In Ezra 4, 6 through 7. And this was the time that Nehemiah was there. And Ezra and Nehemiah worked together. Ezra, what was he? He was a priest, right? And then Nehemiah, who had been a cupbearer, who was not, I don't believe Nehemiah, he was not of the tribe of Levi. I forget which tribe he was. I should think of it here in a minute, but I can't think of it right now. Anyway, both are working together. So as you read the book of Ezra, you read the book of Nehemiah, you can watch how God was working to build up the city walls and to lay the foundations of the temple and so on and so forth. So somebody was trying to stop this. There were some people that were not Jews, and they originally wanted to be part of building the city, and they would have joined right in and built the city all the way, but God had spoke to them and said that their own people, God's own people, were going to build this city. Ezra 4, 6, and 7, and in the reign of Ahasuerus, in the beginning of his reign, wrote they unto him an accusation against the inhabitants of Judah and Jerusalem. In the days of Artaxerxes wrote Bishlam, Mithridates, Tabeel, and the rest of their companions unto Artaxerxes, king of Persia. And the writing of the letter was written in the Syrian tongue and interpreted in the Syrian tongue. So, it wasn't written in the Jewish language, was it? It wasn't Jews writing it. So again, we see there's different languages. Different languages. We have the Syrian tongue, we have the Hebrew tongue, we have the Egyptian tongue, we have all these different languages. Interpreted, what does that mean? Now we read right here and interpret it in the Syrian tongue. The word interpreted, to transfer, that is to translate, to interpret. So here, we had a group of men that got together, and they sit down, so it's like all of us sit right here. We say, we're going to write a letter to King Ahasuerus. And we start writing, and we dictate it out. Okay, now take this away, yeah, add that one, we've got something. Now, we're going to send it, and so we redo it. We send him the copy, we sent the one we want to go, and it's in the Syrian language. We dictated it, we wrote it in Syrian language, we sent the king his copy in the Syrian language. Everything was done in that language. And it was translated and interpreted to the king in his own language. It was written that way also. Daniel 1, 3 and 4. And the king spake unto Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel. Now what is this referring to? Remember, Daniel 1 is the story of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are taken captive. They're taken up to Babylon. Now, in the trail going up there, one of the Psalms is written about this, where the Babylonian soldiers come to the Israelites. They say, sing us a song of the city of peace. Sing us a song of Jerusalem. And what does the Bible say they did? It says they sat down by a river and they wept. It talks about the shackles that they had to wear. They were all chained together. So here, a whole bunch of actually the best and the brightest that they could find in Jerusalem at the time, all young people, they were brought up to Babylon. And why was the king going to do this? Why would he bring these young people to Babylon? Nebuchadnezzar had a system that worked very well. If he could educate people in his system and then send them back down to where they came from, then pretty soon Babylon would be all over the world. And the whole ideals and the mentality of Babylon would go everywhere. But also, he would take the brightest of the bright out of these colleges that he had. He would keep the brightest of the bright right there at Babylon. And he would get advice and get information and have them part of the kingdom there also as well. So when the king spake unto this man, he said, of the certain of the children of Israel, and of the king's seed, and of the princes, children to whom was no blemish, but well favored and skillful in all wisdom and cunning and knowledge, and understanding science, and such as had the ability of them to understand, to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. So here, Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and all these other people, they had to learn a different language, because what language were they speaking? What was it? Hebrew. They spoke Hebrew. That's correct. Okay? And when their ability and acquirements were tested by the king at the close of the 3 years of training, none were found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Their keen apprehension, their choice and exact language, their extensive and varied knowledge testify to the unimpaired strength and vigor of their mental powers. That's the book Historical Sketches, page 210. And I agree with that. It's, you know, the way that you learn a language and do it well, if you're going to be in a situation, you do the very best you can. You get very particular with how you pronounce. I remember my mother, who was from Canada, she was born and raised in Saskatchewan. Her mother was born in England, and she came as a missionary. She was one of the top 5 students in an all-girls college in London, and she came as a missionary to Western Canada. And she was one of these perfectionists with the English language. And as a child, I couldn't say the word ain't. All my cousins would say ain't. And if I came home and I said ain't, you know what would happen? I got my mouth washed out with soap. So if I didn't pronounce a word just a certain way, I would get in trouble. So it was interesting, though, that, you know, growing up in a home like that, and then seeing, you know, going to other friends' homes or in other people's homes or other places, where language didn't mean as much. But in my home, you had to have it right. My father had a Maine accent. You guys probably don't know what that is. When my mother married him, he would say, ka, ban, has. My mother said, this is not going to do. We cannot have that in this home. Now, I didn't know my dad when he spoke that way, because his language was purified by the time I knew him. But I did hear stories later that it was hard for my dad to learn the English language like it needed to be said according to my mom. The particularness of pronouncing a word correctly is a very interesting thing. And now, we've gotten to the place in America where anything goes.
It's true.
You know, when the founding fathers, when they were working on putting this land together, and Benjamin Franklin wrote some on this, and I read what he had to say, not recently, I didn't have time to look it up. I was studying to do the meetings out in Oregon. I did 3 meetings last Sabbath, and so it takes me a long time to put stuff together, so I do apologize. There's only so many hours in a day. I spent all day yesterday working on this and several hours this morning. So Benjamin Franklin mentioned that they knew that if they did not specifically focus on one language with the government and the education of this country would not stand. He was very clear, and the founding fathers were very clear. There was 2 languages that were spoke more than any others. And you remember which ones those were? What's that?
Benjamin Franklin's time.
In Benjamin Franklin's time, there was 2 major languages that were spoke. Now, there was many other languages that were spoken. No? English was one. What was the other one?
French.
Huh?
French.
No, close. German. Okay, it was a very close vote, and they took a vote on whether this nation would speak the German language or the English language. And the majority in the, I call it parliament at the time, spoke English. But many were bilingual and spoke both German and English, and many spoke French, German, and English. Benjamin Franklin spoke those 3 languages. And there was many other languages, but they decided we're going to go with English, because that really has been the major ancestry in the history that was setting up the colonies, and they were under the British Empire. And there was others that actually voted to go German. One, because there was a lot of German-speaking people in the country, and number 2, they wanted a full, complete break from England. But the vote prevailed that we would speak English. So everything was written in English, and when a public-type school system was established, when any schools were established, it was demanded that they teach English only in the school system. And America became the greatest nation on this planet. Language is a very key thing. The first major book that was published in the United States, can you guess what that book was? It was the Bible. Absolutely. And they printed the King James Version of the Bible, and they printed it only in English, obviously. And England raised a point and said, well, you need to pay us royalties for that. And it actually went to a world court. And many people don't think there was a world court back then. Did you guys know that the United States was paid a lot of money from England after the War of 1812? And there was money that was paid to the United States also from England and from France before the War of 1812 for stealing ships and hijacking ships in the high seas. So there was a world court. And you know what the world court decided? That the King James Version Bible was owned by the people. There was no royalties due England. They never charged anybody royalties, and they made a demand of it, except the United States when they broke away from England. Language, words, learning new languages. Isaiah 33, thine eyes shall see the King in his beauty. They shall behold the land that is very far off. Thine heart shall meditate terror. Where is the scribe? Where is the receiver? Where is he that counted the towers? Thou shalt not see a fierce people, a people of deeper speech than thou canst perceive, of a stammering tongue that thou canst not understand. This is a promise in Isaiah 33 that God gave the people of Israel. If they turned to the Lord, they served him with his whole heart. He said, you're not going to come to a situation where you're going to come to a deeper speech than you can understand or perceive. Or everybody's going to be able to communicate. You're going to understand what's going on. You're going to be a well-developed nation. You won't have to search for an alternative. Stammering. The primitive root means to deride. By implication is imitating a foreigner, to speak unintelligibly. You know, it's interesting as you travel across the United States. When I first moved down to Tennessee, that's where I met my wife, so I'm not negative about Tennessee. But, you know, you would stop at a country store or something, especially up in the hills of Tennessee, and where are you from? It's like, what are you saying? Where are you from? You know, it's like, what in the world is he saying? You know? He's like, I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're saying. You know, he's asking you where you're from. Oh, you know. And then you realize by then, you've already heard Yankee. Yankee always came with two words together, never one. And I won't repeat what the word funny Yankee was.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, you know, it's like they spoke a whole different language down south. And I used to like to buy and sell muscle cars. And so I did that for a living for a while down there. And I actually had to get to the place that I could speak just like they would. Because if they knew I was a Yankee, what's that? That's right. There was three things down there that they did not like, and they made it known. 100-degree days, rattlesnakes, and Yankees with U-Hauls. Okay, so those three things that were not well accepted down there. So I would try, and I worked on to pronounce the words and to try to understand so I could communicate. I remember going to a junkyard, and I asked the man, I was looking for an engine for a car. It was a 360 out of an old Dodge, V8. And I asked this guy, he became a good friend of mine. His name was Phil Gray. I said, Phil, you know, do you have an engine? I'm looking for one, a 360. I put in a Dodge. And, yeah, I got one. And he said, what did he say? It's a humdinger. And I said, well, humdinger, what does that mean? You know, I hadn't heard that terminology yet. I'm saying, so, you know, hum and ding. I'm thinking, man, you know, is it run okay? It's jam up. I said, jam up. Is it stuck? Seized up? Can I free it up? You know, he's just shaking his head. You know, it's like, we're not communicating here. So I'm, Lord, help me to understand what this man is saying here so I can, you know, do something here. And finally bought an engine. It turned out to be a pretty good engine. And so I had to learn, what does jam up mean? What does humdinger mean? What is all this? So words convey thought, and we communicate with these words. And so God promised them that they wouldn't have a trouble communicating. Nehemiah. And those days also I saw Jews that had married wives of Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab. And their children spake half in the speech of Ashdod, who could not speak in the Jews' language, but according to the language of each people. We're told these unlawful alliances were causing great confusion in Israel. For some who entered into them were men of high position, rulers whom the people had a right to look for counsel, safe example, for seeing the ruin before the nation that this evil were allowed to continue. Nehemiah reasoned earnestly with the wrongdoers. He recognized that if we bring separation, if we bring confusion, and everybody speaking a different language, that we're not going to be a body, a bond of people. We're going to fall apart. We're not going to be who we need to be. Esther 1, 20, 22. And when the king's decree, which he shall make, shall be published throughout all his empire, for it is great, all the wives shall give to their husbands honor, both the great and small. For he sent letters into all the king's provinces, unto every province according to the writing thereof, and every people after the language, that every man should bear rule in his own house, that it should be published according to the language of every people. Now it's interesting, this is a situation that took place, and we know the story of Esther, how Esther became queen. Vashti, what did she do? She refused to do something for the king. Refused to come to the party, okay? Now, you know, she might have done the right thing, but it was against what the king had ordered, and it was against what some of the men thought ought to happen there. And so a command went all over the then known world that the man would continue to be the household, and the woman had to do everything that the man asked him to do. And it's interesting that they wanted to make sure that it got well known, and they copied it down in not just the Syrian tongue, not just the Babylonian tongue, but every tongue that anybody could speak. And this went everywhere. And there's actually records of this, I believe, in the museum in Turkey, the National Museum there. There is some recognition of this showing up all the way down in Egypt. Okay, so this decree from Artaxerxes went everywhere. Or Ahasuerus, rather, not Artaxerxes. So tongues convey thought. Tongues are how we communicate. Tongues are how we praise God. tongues also get us in a lot of trouble. Anybody ever been in trouble with something they said? I sure have. You, Mike? I can't believe that.
Yeah, right.
You and me both.
Yeah, right.
It's interesting, with tongues, and when you get to certain situations, and again, I like airplanes. People who know me know I'm into aviation. You have to be very particular when you're dealing with aviation. And it used to be the guy in the control tower had complete control of things. If you didn't obey his orders, you'd be in big trouble. And some things happened back, it was probably 10 years ago now, that pilots were not getting the right messages from the control towers. Maybe you guys have heard some of this. And pilots ended up protesting to the federal government, saying they talk too fast, they slur their words, and so they came out with a rule that if you're having a hard time understanding the guy in the tower, you speak to him exactly like you want to be spoken to.
Oh, there you go.
So
That's good.
if the guy in the tower says, turn left heading 234, down, and they go down this whole quick thing, and you don't get it, you can go back on your mic now. You used to have to say, please repeat that. And if you didn't get it after 3 times, they would say, you really shouldn't be flying that airplane. Somebody else, you need to do whatever.
Too late.
Yeah, that's right. Now you can key on that mic and you say, please repeat this exactly how I'm speaking to you at the same rate. And if they don't do it, they get in trouble. Communication is very important. Even more important when lives are at stake. So it's interesting that, I keep using that word interesting, I find things interesting. I say it all the time, I guess. When you're flying an airplane and you're flying to Moscow, which my daughter did this past year, that somebody in that control tower in Moscow, and the pilot that was flying from the United States, a Russian airplane, to Moscow, had to speak basically fluent English. Fluent English. All over the world, when you're going on international flights, somebody in that cockpit must speak English. They didn't choose Russian, they didn't choose Chinese, and there's more Chinese than there's English-speaking people now. Okay? They must speak English. Why was that? Why was it universal?
I was in that creed.
Huh?
Was it in that creed?
No. No, not quite. I mean, yeah, that's maybe coming. But the reason English is spoken in every control tower because the King James Bible went all over the world.
Oh.
And when that Bible went all over the world, people in Africa, people in Russia, people in Germany would learn to speak English and to read English so they could study that word. And it is that scripture that has caused wars. It is that scripture that has caused many people to die. Millions have lost their life over that version of the Bible. But that's why, and if you fly an airplane and you want to fly from this country to another country, you better have somebody who can speak really good English. Or you have to make arrangements beforehand on what you're going to do and how you're going to operate. That make sense? Okay. James 1:26. If any man among you seem to be religious, and bridle not his tongue, but deceiveth his own heart, this man's religion is what?
Vain.
What does that mean? Vain means nothing. His religion means absolutely nothing. Bridle the tongue. What does that mean?
Control.
Yeah, what do you do when you have a horse and you put a bridle on it?
Control.
Huh. Interesting. I'm going to go back to just. We saw, when I was fairly young, no, I guess I was probably 17 or 18 at this time, we were in Western Canada. And we were watching a swinging bridge. It was going across a fairly large river. And some guys came up on horses. There was probably 4 or 5 guys on a horse. And several of them rode right across the swinging bridge. And a lot of people wouldn't hardly get on that bridge. I was amazed they got the horses across there. There was one horse that refused to go across that bridge. He refused to do it. Well, they had that bridle in his mouth, and they had, what do you call the thing that goes around their head there? The halter. Yeah, they had the halter. And they took some, they did something to the bridle, and then on that halter, they put something right here in the forehead, and they tightened it down, where it put a lot of pressure right in the forehead of that horse. And the horse was kind of in pain for a little bit there. And the fellow was an Indian, native Canadian, or Native American, whatever you want to call him. And after they waited a few minutes, he took and led that horse, just like a puppy dog, right across that swinging bridge. I couldn't believe it. I'd never seen anything like it. Remember, my dad had seen that when he was a boy. His father was quite a horseman. And he told me, he said, yeah, I think they're going to pinch a nerve on that horse. That's the only way that I can know to get that across. And I can figure out how and where they're going to pinch that. And it was something right in the front of the horse there. And they tightened the bridle way up, remember? And just let him run across.
Wow.
It's interesting, sometimes God has to do things like that to us, doesn't he?
Probably undoubtedly was a mule.
I don't remember being a mule, but could have been, that's been a while ago.
A mule is, when his foot is not good, he's not gonna.
Yeah, they're pretty stubborn animals, aren't they?
Mules are actually
Why
smarter.
a mule is so.
They're smarter.
They're smarter. There you go. They're smart. They are smart. You know, speaking of a mule, they did an experiment in Rome years ago. I think almost 2,000 or somewhere around 2,000 years ago. You guys may have heard about this. It's in a book that we had at home. And they brought these animals from all over the world that they could, and they put them in a great big amphitheater to see which animals were the strongest animals, would kill the other animals.
Oh my.
And it ended up being a bear and a mule. And they killed all these. The mule actually didn't do any killing. It just kind of stood over by the side, and the bear and all these animals were tearing each other apart. I don't know, I can't remember what they did to get them to fight. But then finally, the bear was the one left. And the other animals were tore up really bad or dead. And the bear went after the mule. And the mule kicked the bear a couple times, and it was all over. And it was amazing that a mule would be smart enough to stay out of the fight. Sometimes we're not that way. You know, as people, we don't stay out of the fight we should stay out of. We should be in a fight that we should be in, the fight against self. Maybe you guys aren't there, but I am. It's not good what. It's a battle I fight every day. Even so, the tongue is a little member, and boasteth great things. Behold, how great a matter a little fire kindleth. And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. So is the tongue among our members, that it defileth the whole body, and setteth on fire the course of nature. And it is set on fire of hell. For every kind of beast, and of birds, and of serpents, and of things in the sea is tamed, and hath been tamed of mankind. But the tongue can no man tame it. It is a unruly evil, full of deadly poison. You guys notice that? Noticing that in this last presidential election, which, you know, I'm 55 years old, I've never seen anything quite like this last election, or maybe others have. But the vehemence that people are showing one to another is amazing. What's that?
Even in
Oh,
our
yeah.
store, people come in and have said they stopped being friends with people on Facebook. I've never seen anything like this.
Normal to each other with nothing.
It is. We were out in Portland, Oregon. We had landed late at night and got up and went down to eat for breakfast. They had a television on there, and we're watching all these protesters throwing things and tear gas going everywhere. And we're thinking, where in the world is this happening? And I couldn't figure out where it was going on. Yeah, it was in Portland, Oregon. I found that out very quickly. So police were everywhere, and there was a lot of stuff going on. And I thought, man, this is crazy.
Yeah, when they took prayer at schools, it started. Because the people, when I was growing up, it wasn't like that.
Yeah, yeah.
No, you didn't open a man's door in his car, you didn't look in, you didn't touch anything that you weren't supposed to touch. That was the way you was taught.
Sure. But now, if you don't lock it and have your keys somewhere, you know, and then you're supposed to have it covered with a blanket if you have anything in there. So you're responsible.
The morals of this country are just.
It's terrible, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy.
It's interesting, taming the tongue, taming the mind, taming the heart. It's basically impossible for us to do. That's why God needs to be in charge of this whole situation, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And if God's not in charge of it, what's gonna happen?
Yeah.
It's gonna be chaos. Chaos. Tame it or turn it loose. What do we do with the tongue? Tame it or turn it loose?
Try like crazy.
What's that?
Try like crazy. Crazy.
Pray to tame it. Pray to tame it. Well, I tell you what. Next week, we're gonna discuss that.
To be continued.
I want you all to come back. You're gonna get all the punchlines next week. But keep in mind what we discussed today. Language, conveying thought, speech. What is it to speak in tongues? What does it mean? What do we do? How is it done? Because the Bible does talk about it, doesn't it? So next week, and trust me, after next week, after we do the program, I'd like to have a Bible study downstairs. We're not going to have the study we usually have this week, because I'd give you away the punchline if we did that. So we'll have a study next week. We'll have a Bible marking class. There's always 15 or 20 verses that we'll do. And so you won't get the whole thing, but you'll get most of it in the study next week. And if anybody has any question next week, I'm happy to take any question. You know, this is an issue. It really wasn't an issue, you know, back in the 1800s. It's been a relatively new thing that has come on to Christianity, but it is something the Bible speaks about, tongues. What is the proper biblical tongues? And that's what we want. We all want what God wants, don't we?
Yeah.
We want to do what God wants. So be here, same place, next week, and Lord willing, we'll answer whatever question we have, and we'll study this together and get the punchline.
I gotta teach Sabbath school.
Well, I guess you won't be here next week.
Oh.
You won't get the punchline, Ted.
No,
You have to switch
Well,
with
I
somebody.
gotta talk to Linda.
Switch it.
Linda's gone.
Yeah, for Thanksgiving.
Anyway,
Sorry, Ken, I'm recording it. I'll get a copy.
Huh?
I'll be recording it.
Oh, good.
I'll get a copy to you.
let's sing our closing hymn. It's 493. What a way to end, huh, Mike? 493.
I was seeking for things I could not satisfy. And then I heard my Savior speaking, now from my well, and now I shall run dry. Till my conqueror, I lifted up, Lord, and once was thirsty of my soul. Bread of heaven, feed me till I want no more. Till my cup, fill it up and make me whole. There is in the spirit in my Creator, no pleasure everything's alone. But one thing that's a wondrous treasure, that I find in Jesus Christ the Lord. Till I can go, I left it up, Lord, and I this thirsting of my soul. Bread of heaven, feed me till I want no more. Till my cup, fill it up and make me whole. So much journey, things I surrender. They don't be some of us away. But blessed Lord, come and save me. Save me, today let me pray. Till my conqueror, I of my soul. But I'm dying, lead me till I want no more. Till I come to the awful midnight hour.
Bow our heads for word of prayer. Father, I thank you for sending angels to be with us today, and I pray, Lord, that these angels will go with us as we go our way. Lord, that things will be clear in our mind about your plan of salvation and what you want us to do. We live in a very difficult time, and I just pray that each one of us has that peace that passes all understanding. That we become more like Christ every day, holy, harmless, and undefiled. That whatever situation we're in, we recognize who holds our hand through this whole journey through life. I ask this in Jesus' name and for his sake. Amen.
You coming down? We're eating. Sorry about that.
I guess you're first.
Me, it's right here.